Hello everyone, my name's Dr. Paul Rose, and on behalf of the folks at Wild Welfare, I'd like to provide a brief presentation on welfare assessment methods for captive Anseriformes. By the Anseriformes, I mean the ducks, geese, swans and screamers. This presentation is based on a standardized method that I have published in the journal Animals that's available fully open access on their website. And this was published in conjunction with my colleague, Dr. Michelle O'Brien from the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust. And the reference for this welfare method will be made available during this presentation. There are around about 180 different species of the Anseriformes, and they're incredibly common in captivity. And some species, like this tufted duck, can be found in both public zoological collections and in private aviculture too. And what I would like to do in this presentation is to provide you with some examples of characteristics of the birds and of their environment that you can observe, record, and evaluate that will give you an idea of the bird's welfare state, so that any changes to the environment or the husbandry can be based on evidence collected from the individuals and hopefully changes enacted that will improve the welfare of the animals under your care. It's very important when you do a welfare assessment of your Anseriformes that you are consistent with the method that is used, that you follow the same approaches and you are standardized in what you are looking for. Whilst there might be 180 or so species of the ducks, geese, swans and screamers, they're all adapted for a wetland lifestyle and they all share similar features. So we can look across this diverse body of birds to see similarities in their anatomy, in the form and function of their bodies, and in their behaviour patterns as well. And we can use these to judge the suitability of the husbandry and of the environments that we provide. And then we can hone in on species-specific differences that are essential to how that species fulfills all of its natural behaviours, ensures it can act in exactly the same way as a wild individual would do, so that its quality of life can be as best possible that we can provide in the human managed environment. And therefore, welfare assessment must be a continual cycle of observation, interpretation and reflection, evaluation, and then re-observation. As I said, this presentation is based on this paper that's available in the journal Animals. And here you can see one of the diagrams I have provided from it. A cycle of performing a welfare audit, observing birds under current conditions, auditing their welfare based on what we deem as resource-based measures, i.e. things we provide, things in the environment, as well as animal-based measures, i.e. personality or emotional characteristics of the animals themselves. Results of the welfare audit are reviewed with the stakeholders. Changes to husbandry or changes to the environment are implemented based on these results. Birds are observed again, the welfare audit is considered, the cycle continues. And what I'm going to do now is provide information on what things you can look for when you wish to perform this welfare audit. Many species of duck, like this mandarin, are incredibly beautiful with intricate patterns on their feathers. And one of the things that we can judge visually and from afar is plumage quality and condition. It's essential that ducks keep their plumage well oiled and waterproof. So any tatty, poor quality, dry or dusty feathers outside of the molt is a signal that the bird is not in good health. And this is a nice example of how we should consider species-specific differences too. Yes, all ducks must have sleek, well-oiled, waterproof plumage, but sometimes there are exceptions to what their plumage looks like. And the mandarin is an excellent example of this. During the breeding season, the mandarin drake has these two beautiful orange sail feathers that grow from his back. These stick out from the body. We can check that he is keeping them in good condition by looking to see how well oiled they are, how well zipped together are all of the filaments in that feather. And here in this close-up photo, you can see that this bird is clearly provided with an environment that allows it to bathe and wash and preen itself, oiling its feathers so they're all smooth and well zipped together. Notice how the feathers all align. Notice how they are all sleek. And notice how you can also tell if a bird is kept fully winged or flight restraint, i.e. has it had its feathers trimmed. This is a fully winged individual. You can see the primary feathers, they are the long feathers with the white stripes on them, point together over each other. If one of these sets of primary feathers was missing, that bird would be flight restrained. Its feathers had been trimmed. Any flight restrained bird must be kept in a safe environment free from predators. So any welfare audit on flight restrained birds should be done with that in mind. Is the housing safe and secure? Is it pest proof and is it predator proof? Because obviously, if we have clipped their feathers, we have taken away one of their abilities to remove themselves from danger. Such ornate and intricate plumage colours and patterns are one of the most characteristic features of male ducks in the breeding season. Here's a Baikal teal. It's a dabbling duck, so it's a different type of duck compared to the mandarin. But again, you can see a lot of investment in colour and patterning of the feathers for breeding. And therefore, the bird must be able to maintain this plumage, to keep all of the lines accurate and straight. You can see that beautiful white stripe down his side. A surefire way of telling that this animal has been provided with an appropriate environment to keep itself clean and tidy and its feathers well maintained. And therefore, those feathers will serve their rightful purpose of making him look beautiful, of making him look attractive to the females, and therefore all of their regular courtship and breeding behaviours can then be performed. So one small environmental feature, clean bathing water, the swimming, bathing and preening in, is essential to a whole other range of behaviours. At some times of the year, ducks can look incredibly scruffy. These are my own birds in my back garden. Don't worry, I'm not a bad owner. In the summertime, they're meant to look like this. This is called the eclipse plumage, and it's when male ducks, which are brightly coloured in the breeding season, like my mandarin and like my Baikal teal, lose all of their plumage and resemble the female. Here we've got the female wood duck at the front. She's in her normal colours. And at the back, we have got my male wood duck, and he's lost his colours. He looks quite scruffy. He's resembling the female. In the eclipse period, for those species that go into eclipse, it's important to remember this change in colour and change in plumage condition because it's when the birds are molting. Ducks are also more inactive during the molt, but they could be also more wary because they all lose their flight feathers at the same time, so they render themselves flightless. So these behavioural signals should also be factored into a welfare audit. Behaviour is one of our most important tools that we can use for welfare assessment. These are bar-headed geese. Geese can walk excellently well on land. They are evolved for grazing, so they have strong, sturdy legs and a thick, stout bill. So these birds are adept at walking and adept at swimming. But other species of wildfowl that are more specialised might be more clumsy on land, or they might be less good at swimming. So we must look at the natural ecology of the species before we judge the style of enclosure it's been provided with. But again, in these birds, note the quality of their plumage, note how well it's maintained, and note their bright shining eye. No discharge, no sores, no blemishes. These birds are in a suitable enclosure. They're behaving normally, They can clearly access the water and they look in good condition. Some species of ducks, like the South African pochard, which is a diving duck, are much more adept in the water than they are on land. So any perching should be shallow, not high up. It should be easily accessible to a bird whose legs are placed quite far back on its body. Compare this picture to the geese that we just saw. The geese have their legs in the middle of their body. That enables them to walk much more adeptly on land. The diving ducks, like this pochard, are built more like a submarine. They can dive under the water and they can spend many hours floating around in their pool, perfectly happy on the water. They're less likely to spend long periods of time on the land. But all ducks like to perch. At some point, it's good for them to remove their body from the water so they can preen all of their feathers. Again, consider this behavioural ecology, i.e. where do you put the perches so they're accessible when you're designing an enclosure. We talked about the clarity of a bird's eyes in the previous example. In this example, the bird has a bright red eye, and that is normal. In many species of wildfowl, the drake, the male bird, has a different coloured eye to the female. Again, check for clarity. Make sure the eye is fully opened. Make sure there's no third eyelid visible. But check your species-specific differences so that you know exactly what you're looking for. And here we've got probably one of the most aquatic species of wildfowl. This is a white-headed duck. It's a member of a group of birds called stiff-tails, and you can see the stiff tail feathers that the bird is preening in this photograph. Incredibly aquatic, stiff-tails have their legs right at the end of their body. They are hopeless on land. They nest incredibly close to the water, and they perch on low branches, either just under the surface of the water or branches that are floating on the water's surface itself. You must provide these types of resources to allow the bird to remove itself from the pool so it can preen all of its feathers, because only then can it stay healthy. Again, another example of how the resources provided in the environment and our knowledge of the species-specific ecology link together to enable a full welfare assessment to be completed. Clean water for bathing is essential for all Anseriform species, even for the 3 species of screamer that are much more terrestrial than the ducks, geese and swans. Different water levels, different depths of water are important for different species. These are magpie geese. They're an unusual species from Australia. They have long legs with strong toes, and they can actually perch in trees. Their toes are not that webbed, so they don't swim that well, even though they can swim. So shallow water for bathing is preferred in this species. Always check how your birds bathe. Do they do that with ease? Can they extend their wings fully? Do they flap and beat their wings on the water's surface without having any difficulty of movement? Can they fully submerge themselves in the water provided? It's essential that all wildfowl are able to fully immerse their heads in water, because this keeps their eyes in the best possible health. But for key areas of behavioural welfare and key areas of psychological welfare, water that is deep enough for the whole body to be immersed is encouraged. This submersion of the whole body is one of the best ways of providing an enhanced quality of life for any ducks, geese and swans in your care. We also need to think about the social environment that our birds are kept in too. These are whistling ducks, an incredibly social species, and these whistling ducks should not be kept on their own. Because of the complexities of their social relationships, they're going to be much happier, much more contented in a social group. Some species, for example, like the swans, are incredibly territorial. They wouldn't be kept in a social group. They would be kept in bonded pairs. Check the social environment as part of your welfare audit and make sure that social environment matches the natural behavioural ecology of the species. A nice example of the importance of ecology is seen in the screamers, these three species of birds that are the unusual link between the ducks, geese and swans, whose order they share. Screamers are also Anseriformes, but the game birds too. They're an ancestral link between the two groups. Screamers have a hooked game bird-like beak and chicken-like legs, but they are aquatic and they will go swimming. So it's important that their enclosures contain perching, contain vegetation that they can clamber through, contain a pool with a shallow side that they can easily access, as well as deeper areas for swimming and bathing in. And screamers also display some important social behaviours too. The commonest screamer species found in captivity is the crested or southern screamer. Like all screamers, it performs this mutual preening behaviour, or allopreening, when the birds enhance their pair bonds by preening each other's necks and faces. A very good way of enhancing screamer welfare is to enable this behaviour to be performed by ensuring the screamer you are housing is kept as a bonded pair. Single birds do not do well. The pair bond is incredibly important to the quality of life of this species, and that's true in the wild as in for captivity. That leads me nicely into the last part of this talk, which looks at the behaviours that we can describe that tell us about emotional or personality characteristics. So up to this point, I've been talking about resource-driven metrics measurements of animal welfare. The things we provide the animal with, the things that we allow it to do. Now let's look at how would we describe an animal's personality, because that gives us an understanding of its underlying emotional states and how its welfare might be affected. The wildfowl display their emotions really easily. Some species are incredibly territorial. This is a blue-winged goose. This is a male who's protective of its female. He's naturally territorial. So any change to this territorial behaviour, any deviation away from the norm, maybe he slinks away from you, maybe he doesn't want to defend his partner, would suggest that something is not quite right with that bird and you should investigate. Getting close to your birds, making sure they are comfortable around you, always letting them know where you are, moving quietly and deliberately, talking to them so they are aware of your voice, builds confidence. Therefore, you can get up close to them to perform a visual assessment. You can perform a visual assessment of body condition and of feather condition, but you can also do a visual assessment of their personality too. Trumpeter swans, the large white bird, is the largest species of wildfowl. They should be confident. They shouldn't flee from animals or people around them. This Chiloe widgeon is an incredibly friendly species, and in fact, the zoological collections like to display them because of how friendly they are to members of the public. Any change in demeanour, any change in personality, maybe a swan is withdrawn, or maybe a swan has become hyper-aggressive, or maybe your Chiloe widgeon are apathetic, maybe they don't want to come over and say hello to you. You would know the bird's individual characteristics because of your day-to-day routine at seeing them. But any change to these behaviours could be indicative of an underlying problem and should therefore be investigated further. If you can get close enough to your birds to do regular handling and regular health checking, maybe you have birds that are incredibly tame because you have trained them, like the example of the magpie goose that sat on my arm. That makes for a much easier health and welfare assessment. You have the bird in hand. You can check the musculature along its keel. You can check its feather condition. You can check the quality of its preen gland Is it clean? Is it producing oil? You can check the eyes, nostrils, soles of the feet. You can flex wing and leg joints. All of these things give you a clue as to the overall quality of life of the bird based on his health and well-being. For species like the Buick swan, where you might not be able to gain that rapport, but you can still perform a well-managed and organised bird catch at a regular interval during the year to check for the bird's condition, can add extra information to the observations you do as part of your welfare auditing. It's essential that you keep an eye on all of your birds, that you know their personalities, and that you can evaluate their personality alongside of what you provide them with to ensure that their welfare remains good. What I would like to finish on is a short video of one of my own birds to give you an example of what this means in practice. This is Bruce. He's my red-breasted goose. He's about 15 years old. So he's a grand old man and he's living out his twilight years in my back garden. Bruce, because of his age, has some slight mobility problems. But so long as he walks around normally, so long as he accesses the pool, and so long as he can graze normally like a goose would do and keep his feathers in good condition, we keep him alive and we make sure he's comfortable and we make sure he has a good quality of life. We check that he gets along well with the other birds, particularly at times of year when they can be a bit fractious, for example when they molt. So long as he can get away from the other birds, so long as he's not being bullied, we don't really mind that he's a bit limpy. And here you can see my male wood duck gets annoyed with my male mandarin, and he then gets annoyed with Bruce. But Bruce is able to remove himself from the situation. He doesn't seem to be in any pain or discomfort. Yes, he has a slight limp when he walks, but his overall quality of life is good. His feathers are in excellent condition, and he molts a complete set of plumage every year. So consequently, this welfare assessment of looking at how he moves, of looking at his personality, of looking at his feather condition, and of looking at the social interactions in the group tell us about his overall welfare state. I hope you found that a useful presentation, and I hope it's provided you with some key pointers to consider that will tell you about resource-based welfare measures, what do we provide, what's in the environment, as well as animal-based measures, the bird's personality and underlying emotions. I'm happy to take any further questions on this. There is my email address. Thank you for listening.